So I've drawn this little man on a boat here, which I think you'll agree is really very good. But I've got a quick question for you. What is the difference between this and this? Okay, so it's a bit of a stupid question, but the point here is that one is static and the other is alive. And in gaming, when you're dealing with 2D images specifically, I think making things feel alive is really important when it comes to maintaining a player's immersion and interest. Because, you know, even though you might be drawing scenes with the illusion of depth, you are still just sticking a 2D guy on a bunch of 2D lines and colours and hoping that you can sell the illusion of it being a 3D space. This is something I've been thinking about as I work my way through the first pass of my game's 30-something scenes. Movement and making things feel more alive. So how do you actually achieve that sense of movement in a point-and-click adventure game? And what's my plan for making things spring to life? Welcome back to the Point and Click Devlog, an ongoing series in which we are always attempting to work smarter, not harder. So I don't know if you've played Return to Monkey Island, but well, I mean, you should probably play Return to Monkey Island if you're interested in this kind of game, but that's by the by. Anyway, the point is that one of the things about it that stuck out most to me was the level of movement in each scene. As you walk around its islands and ships and stuff, you'll see spider webs blowing in the wind, rats and bugs running across the foreground, fish moving about in giant barrels. Pretty much every scene has at least one thing helping to turn a still image into an environment. And that's what I want to achieve in my game too by the time it's ready to launch. I want environments rather than images, I guess. Okay, so how? Well, as someone who is fumbling their way through all this animation stuff as a rank amateur, it's a bit of a tough ask. But I figure that at this point I could at least walk you through 1, what I've done so far, and 2, what's in the plan, so that you can see what I'm talking about when it comes to adding movement to 2D scenes. First up, just to sort of reiterate my working process right now, I'm building every scene in my game so that the NPCs are there, the dialogues are written, and the core puzzles all work. Then when that's done, I'm going to go back through and do a second and third pass and add extra animations, details, inventory item interactions, and all that other stuff that makes one of these games not just, you know, an interactive cutscene. So I guess if this was like writing a book, I'm working through the first draft before then attempting many subsequent passes to add polish. Sorry, that's probably a bit too much info, but all it really means is that any flourishes that are there are pretty much just examples of things that I felt compelled to do in the moment, rather than indication of a finished scene, because there are no finished scenes. Oh, and if you think that the background art on show here varies a bit from scene to scene, then you might want to watch this video about how I hired an artist to spruce things up a bit. Anyway, the strategy I've decided on for these flourishes is one that will involve adding 4 things to each scene: parallax, rain, background animations, and sound effects. So let's take a quick look at how each one is going to work, starting with everybody loves parallax. Here's some parallax in that popular game you know, and look, I've even got some here on my personal website. If you're unsure, parallax is just the effect where a sense of depth is created by having different layers of imagery moving at different speeds in relation to your point of view. Like when you're looking out of a car window, for example, the stuff nearest to you will be moving a lot faster than the stuff on the horizon. And in 2D games, your point of view is usually the camera. So it's no surprise that you'll find this effect in pretty much all 2D games where suggesting depth is a desired effect, and mine is no different. Luckily for me, there is a component for this baked right into Unity that lets you apply parallax to anything in the background with just a tick box, and then you can just play around with how it reacts to the camera in-game until it looks right to you. So in my game, the background scenery outside the building, which currently is just a series of placeholder images stolen from the internet, all move as they would in relation to a camera's perspective if this was a real place. But also in my game, and this is a tip I stole from Jeremy Fritz after he used it in his game Dexter Stardust, the movement of the mouse actually creates a bit of parallaxy depth too. And again, there's just a tick box for this in Adventure Creator's camera script that you can tick to follow cursor and then play around with how subtle or insane you want that influence to be. I think the two combined are a great starting point. It gives every scene a bit of movement and grounds that movement within this kind of fake 3D-ness. I love rain. In fact, I even made a whole video about why rain in games is so good. But rain is cheating, really. Or if not cheating, then it's a bit of a lazy person's crutch for this kind of problem. And that is because it is the easiest way in the world to inject some atmosphere and movement into a scenario without having to try very hard at all. And because I am a charlatan, that is exactly why I've decided to set my game on a rainy day. Now, when I first tried to achieve this, I watched a few tutorials on how best to animate rain and then attempted to do something like what I saw in those videos using Procreate on the iPad, which was a process involving lots of diagonal grey lines that I would just shift around for a few frames on repeat, and then that did the job for a while, but I was never really happy with what I'd done in that respect. However, when I went snooping on the Unity asset store, I found a couple of assets that have totally fixed that issue for me. So what we have here is two particle effect assets, one for rain and wind, and one that's a kind of droplets on the window effect. I've basically combined them into one prefab that I then just pull into every scene behind the main scene art and then resize so that it works. I will link both of the assets in the description below if you're interested, but rest assured they are pretty easy to figure out. The rain one even has just sliders for how intense you want both the wind and the rain, and they actually come with their own sound effects too. So let's take this scene for example. Again, the backdrop and the scene outside the window are kind of placeholder for now, but here we've got rain outside and droplets that form and run randomly down the glass, all thanks to those two particle effects. Here, where we're outside the main building, I've just got a couple of these rain effects overlapping with a bit of wind, and I think that really brings this outdoor scene to life. Oh, and there will be some smoke coming out of that pipe eventually, which brings me neatly onto the other tool in my arsenal eventually will be a bunch of 2D animations that help add a bit of movement to each scene. As mentioned, most of these will come in the polish phase of development, but I have got one to show you just as an example. In this basement here, I've got this pipe that leaks a drop of water into this puddle every few seconds. It's just a few frames of animation that loop with a subtle sound effect, but I think it's those little details that make all the difference. And in this lab scene, I've got all these dials and gizmos that move around as well as the water. And I've got plans for loads of these across the whole game. I'd like each scene to have a couple of things happening alongside the rain in order to really sell the sense that this is an environment and things are moving instead of just a series of 2D images. So that might be a flickering bulb, a fly buzzing around a bin, a rat running along a pipe, that kind of thing. Like this scene will have some bubbling pots on a little flame and the food signs will glow and flicker, and in this scene I'd like to have a little bookworm wiggling around every now and again. You get the idea. Because yeah, I think that extra movement really helps bring these 2D images to life. A while ago I backed Foolish Mortals on Kickstarter, and I remember when the game smashed its funding target, one of the stretch goals was that the game's designer David Younger wanted to add a bunch of these kinds of animations. Here's a little sneak peek from the backer newsletter which shows exactly what I'm trying to get across. Lovely stuff. 2D animations, I like them. And then there's the last piece of the puzzle. The Nothing mind-blowing here, obviously. I'd just be keen to use whatever sound effects I can find or make to complement these animations and add extra ambience. So that's, you know, bubbling water in this scene and a roaring fireplace in this one. So far in games development, I've been sourcing sound effects from freesound.org. Freesound is stocked full of weird stuff that people have recorded and uploaded for some reason. In some instances, they want to be credited for these, because why wouldn't you want to be credited for this? But most of them are copyright free and you can do with them whatever you want. But there are loads of other repositories out there of free sound effects that you can use if you just dig around on game dev forums and Reddit. And I'm hoping that with all of these things working together, the end result will be a game that feels more alive than the sum of its parts really should. So yeah, that's that, I guess. Parallax, rain, animations, sound effects. The 4 horsemen of the 2D backdrop success matrix. Anyway, here is my Patreon, and here is another video.